All right, and we're on. This is Mind Wars. I'm Chris Ryan, and on today's show we have Sandi Adams from Glastonbury in England, who has been researching and exposing the dangers of Agenda 21 for over 10 years now. She believes this is a manual of war against humanity that has been played out right under our nose for decades, and she is here today to tell us what exactly Agenda 21 really is. Sandi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Chris.
No problem. So before I say dive into this very vast and complex topic, just tell us a small bit about yourself and how you originally came across Agenda 21 yourself.
Well, I was working in London, actually. I was a set designer in corporate live events and film and theatre. And I did work for quite a few big corporations like Google and Microsoft and GlaxoSmithKline, and I wasn't enjoying working for them, to be honest. There was something not quite right. I mean, I met Bill Gates and did a huge installation for him in London, and I met Eric Schmidt from Google, and I think GlaxoSmithKline was probably the most challenging because they were trying to penetrate the Ayurvedic market, and I just got a definite no in my compass, you know, and I decided to come down to live after the crash in 2008. I decided to leave London and come and live in the countryside in Somerset, and it was there really I started looking into all the alternative stuff and seeing exactly what these corporations are doing, and Agenda 21 came up into my radar and I started reading about it, but didn't really get too hooked on it, just was observing it and reading about it and really joining dots about how it's playing out. And then in 2014 in Somerset, we had this huge flood where it was about 60, I can't remember, I think it was 65 square miles of Somerset was completely underwater. And I was down in this place called Boroughbridge, working on something else at the time, and it was obvious that the River Parrett was getting higher and higher, and it burst its banks eventually. And the best thing to do was to muck in and start sandbagging, and that's what I did with the locals. And everything was run from the local pub and the village hall, really. There was no help from the government at all at that stage. And it ended up with an aid agency coming in from the Haiti earthquake, a lovely Sikh organization who were sandbagging all night and all day, but no government agencies at all, no Navy, no Army, no. I think the Environment Agency was terrified. They just scuttled away. And so we carried on sandbagging, and it was obvious that it was quite serious. And then all the news agencies turned up during the day on the bridge, Sky News, BBC and all that, just watching the river rising and watching the operation going ahead. And there was a journalist down there that I got talking to, and his name was Christopher Booker. He worked for the Telegraph. I think he was a freelance journalist, but I got chatting to him, and I you know, we just kind of clicked. He's quite an elderly gentleman at the time, and he said, "This is Agenda 21," and I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, look at." He told me to look at the Ramsar Treaty and the what was the other one? The Policy 6 of the Environment Agency. And he said, "Go away, do your homework, and you'll find it's Agenda 21." And sure enough, I did, and really that whole area was designated by Baroness Young via the Environment Agency. She was the head of the Environment Agency at the time in the 1990s. That area that flooded was designated to flood under UN Agenda 21 from the Ramsar Treaty that happened in the 1970s. It was supposed to be a floodplain for the preservation of wild water birds and water conservation, water animals, you know, otters and wading birds. And yet I was watching deer floating down the River Parrett and hedgerows underwater, huge loss of wildlife and diversity and biodiversity. And I thought, this is ridiculous. This doesn't make sense. And it's only when I actually looked into it and I realized that Agenda 21 was really a land grab, a huge operation to take land and use it and keep it for what they call biodiversity, but actually get the people off the land. And that's effectively what it did, because there are farmers there who never, their livestock never came back. People lost their livelihoods. People's houses are still, they can't sell them. You know, it's been a real disaster for that area. And I got looking into Agenda 21, and I looked, you know, I found out where it came from and the whole history of it. And if you'd like, I can talk about it further. And you know, it's quite a journey. If you realise that Agenda 21, it's put out as this amazing way of creating an equitable world, and it's the complete opposite. And it was thought about, it was brought about at the Earth Summit in 1992 by, and this is it. You can get it on Amazon. You can have a look at it. And it was really, it was brought about by the United Nations in order to control just about everything on the planet. Now that sounds a big thing to say, but it's absolutely what it is. It was a plan to control every resource, every mineral, every plant, everything, every means of production, and it really is, and they actually called it the new way to re-engineer the whole of society. Now that was a big thing to say in 1992. It was the blueprint for the reorganization of society. And it was brought about by a number of people, mostly billionaires. There was Maurice Strong, at the time was the Secretary General of the United Nations, and he was the grandfather of Agenda 21. Now he's quite an interesting character. He was a convicted criminal. He was convicted with Adnan Khashoggi with the arms for oil for food scandal in the 1990s. And so he was exiled to China after he'd created the Earth Summit. But at the Earth Summit, he was his cohorts with this whole thing was Edmund de Rothschild and David Rockefeller, all the big movers and
the
shakers,
usual suspects,
big, these big guys. Barack Obama was very involved. George Soros, of course. There were a number of people involved with the planning and the execution of it. And it was a very clever plan, because it was all based on this whole lie of CO2 and of global warming. And the whole thing was really about getting people, and not only were the big movers and shakers at that meeting in Rio, but there was also about there were a lot of NGOs, and there was about 20,000 paid activists there as well, who were actually there to push the whole CO2 agenda, green activists. And the thing about Agenda 21 is it's a Trojan horse. You know, it's not a real green agenda. It is a fake green agenda, an astroturf agenda, if you like. It's not real. It purports to be. It says, oh yeah, you know, we'll make it all a sort of green utopia. But this is not about, this is nothing to do with creating a green utopia where everybody's, you know, going to be treated in this wonderful way where, you know, things are going to be great. It's actually all about control, as we're seeing with this pandemic. You know, it's not a good thing. It's not about utopia. It's about dystopia. It's control. So the Earth Summit was agreed, and 179 countries signed up to Agenda 21 at the Earth Summit in 1992 to save the planet, effectively. And they were really pushed into this by a lot of coercion and mind control about the planet is dying, and this, all the stuff that we're hearing from Greta Thunberg now was going on then. And they even had the same kind of young girl. They had a young girl, I can't remember her name now, but she was there pushing the agenda. And
Do you
sure
believe
enough,
these 179 countries, as you say, some of them were sort of coerced and pushed into it? Do you believe the majority of them didn't actually know what was going
no,
on and what the end game was?
no, of course not. No, they didn't. They thought that you see that it was done very, very cleverly, because Maurice Strong had paid the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He had created that himself. And they're paid scientists who are paid by the United Nations to actually push out, whatever the United Nations want them to say. And of course, if he's saying, well, we've got all these scientists, now these scientists are paid to actually push out misinformation, as ClimateGate in 2009 proved. And I could go into that a little bit later. But the fact is that he created the IPCC, and most countries really thought that the planet was dying. You've got Al Gore with his inconvenient truth, with all his completely skewed data, saying, but you know what they'd done? I mean, prior to that, Al Gore, Maurice Strong, all the Rothschilds, everyone, they'd created the carbon credit banks before the Earth Summit. They'd created the Chicago Climate Exchange with Obama, to make loads of money on the CO2 taxes. So this was all a scam to actually make money and to set up this green economy, which they're now threatening us with now.
Of course, it was nothing got to do with saving the planet.
And no, it's not about saving the planet at all. It's about making money out of us and controlling us with the threat. And again, it's the fear-based threat. You know, we're getting it right now, again, with this virus. It's, if you don't do this, this will happen. And this is what we're living with. We're living in a fear-based society, which is not a healthy society to be living in. And it started really at that point. I mean, to be honest, the whole agenda has been around for much, much longer, because it's also tied up with the technocracy movement of the 1930s. Now, the technocracy movement of the 1930s happened at a time very similar to now, where people were in a depression, a terrible depression, and because the economy had crashed in the 1930s. And there was a bunch of political scientists and technocrats got together in Columbia University and decided to create a new form of economy. And instead of having a price-based economy, they wanted to create a carbon economy, an energy economy. And they worked very closely in Columbia University with IBM. They've shared a facility. And the whole thing was to create this technocratic green economy. But it was technocratic as well, because it was all linked up to algorithms and, well, in those days, very simple ones. But it was linked up to how do you create a new economy using a price, getting rid of capitalism, basically, because they were fed up with that, because it had caused this huge crash in the 1930s, which is where we are now at the moment. There's a lot of people that want communism right now, because it's, you know, even the United Nations are talking about capitalism, not capitalism. If you look on their site, I mean, it's a nonsense, you know, it's a sort of rather bizarre communitarianism that we're dealing with now. And but it's interesting, because that was all shelved in the 1930s. That all got shelved because of the Second World War. But in 1971, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who again, Club of Rome, one of the big movers and shakers, he revived the technocracy movement and has brought it in incrementally, and it's all part of Agenda 21. So Zbigniew Brzezinski saw the value in creating this technocratic green economy. And he's been the one bringing it in. And this is what Agenda 21 is all about. It's a Trojan horse. And what happened really, and David Icke will support this, because he was a Green Party member at the same time that I was a Green Party member. And it got taken over, because I was more Ecology Party, and then it turned into the Green Party. And as soon as it turned into the Green Party, it changed. It suddenly became this beast with all these NGOs, and it changed beyond, instead of being a grassroots organization, it became a global operation. And that's when I moved out and I left the Green Party, because and loads of my friends did at the time. We said, there's something wrong here. It's not it's not right. It's changed.
It's a smokescreen.
The Green Party, yeah, the Green Party was hijacked to bring in the Trojan horse of Agenda 21, and that happened around 1990s, early 90s. And I was totally taken in by it at one point. I was a transition towner, you know. I was really into all this, and I suddenly, you know, I went to see The Inconvenient Truth. I really believed that this was something good, and then slowly but surely you do a 360 turn because you realize what really is going on. So what happened was, you know, obviously at the prior to Agenda 21. Now the history of it is it comes in the form of the Club of Rome is instrumental in all this. The Club of Rome is a think tank for the United Nations, and if you look on Wikipedia, it just says it's a group of world leaders who have you know, an interest in world events and how it affects, you know, we the people, and how, you know, they're very benign.
Sounds lovely on the outside, yeah.
As a very benign organization, yeah. But actually the Club of Rome is behind all these big things like the Trilateral Commission, the, you know, the Company of 300, all those, the CFR, you know, all these people, all these groups, Davos, you know, the World Economic Forum. The Club of Rome is kind of behind all of these, and it's the big, you know, if you actually could see the tentacles, it's wrapped around everything. Now the Club of Rome, in 1987, they produced this report, and actually prior to this, there was another one called Limits to Growth, which again was about trying to stop the global economy from growing. And Limits to Growth was actually published in the 1970s. But after that, in 1987, this was published. Now, this was published by Gro Harlem Brundtland, who worked with Maurice Strong at the United Nations. She at the time was the president of Norway. And this really was a Marshall Plan, in the same way that Limits to Growth was about not having a global economy that grows, that actually contracts. This one was about how they would bring that about. And the way that they did it, which I thought was quite clever.
That book is called Our Common Future.
It's called Our Common Future, sorry, yes, Our Common Future. And it was one of the precursors. It was one of the Club of Rome reports to create Agenda 21. And it was a Marshall Plan. It was a very clever plan to shift money from what they called the first world polluters, which is Europe and America, Australia, the first world countries, and shift the economy over to India and China, who were the non-polluters, who were poorer. And it sounded like a very worthy thing, but actually what it was to do was to actually create very cheap labor, to create the tech in order to bring what we're seeing now about. Because at the Earth Summit at the climate change, the climate summit in 2015, where I think it was the one where Trump walked. Was it the one where Trump walked out? I can't remember. It was decided that the India and China could triple their emissions, but the rest of Europe and America had to go down to zero carbon. And that's when people said, well, hang on, why would that happen? You know, why is India and China allowed to triple their emissions? They're the biggest polluters. Actually, the rest of the...
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And you realize then that the whole thing is a scam, because they want to make as much money as they can, and they've got cheap labor to create the tech. And India and China are booming as far as the economy, their economies were going. Their economies were booming by then. Anyway, it just became a bit of a nonsense, but that's jumping forward from, you know, Our Common Future. The next one that happened was this one, which is called The First Global Revolution. This is written by a chap called Schneider, and I think there's another name, his name, Alexander King and Bertrand Schneider. And they wrote this, and this was really to try and think of a way of creating a crisis, a global crisis that would unite humanity together for the common good. So, and in this, on page 114, they actually say, you know, there's various scenarios. Again, they're thinking of scenarios, the same as Event 201. They're thinking of scenarios. Now, what would be a scenario that would be so catastrophic that it would unite everyone on the planet in a common cause, so that we could actually create some sort of order out of chaos, or whatever they were trying to do? And it was on page 114 of this, it actually says, you know, we thought of famine, we thought of earthquakes, we thought of this, that, but we thought global warming would fit the bill. So actually in there,
that was their big trump card.
they actually say global warming would fit the bill. It's a perfect scenario. And so this is how, this is in 1991. So in 1992, comes Agenda 21. So they've actually realized that, you know, they can actually unite everyone with this threat of global warming, and everybody will adhere to it and go along with it in order to save the planet. So you give up all your rights, your freedoms, you give up your cars, you know, they want to get rid of flying. They want to get rid of all the things that, you know, freedom of movement, and create the smart cities. Now, interestingly enough, after Agenda 21 came this. Now, this is really huge. This is, oh, I can hardly lift it. This is the Global Biodiversity Assessment. And this was the action plan to put Agenda 21 into action. Now, this is where literally it's an inventory of everything on this planet and how to control it. All water, all land, all animals, human beings. And it's in here, I think it's page 993, they talk about creating the human settlement zones. And now that was a shock to me to see it actually in writing. And I'm talking, when I can't remember when I bought this. This was after the Somerset Levels flooding. I got hold of this from America, and there's very few of these left, because the Club of Rome and the United Nations tried to deny that this was ever printed. I heard, because you can't get hold of copies of it now, but it's got the whole plan laid out in there, exactly how they're going to build the settlements, human settlement zones, and it links up with the Wildlands Project. They mention the Wildlands Project in there, and I don't know if any of you have ever seen the Wildlands map of America, but that was a big, I actually haven't got a picture of it here, but that was a big thing in you know, that really woke people up. The Wildlands Project of America was this map of America, and it was really basically in two colors, yellow and red, with just some little dots of gray. And basically it's the whole plan for America was to rewild the whole of America, and just have the human settlement zones, which were the rewilding area was only for federal use. And you just had these small areas that were for Indian reservations. They put the Indian reservations in a different place, but the human settlement zones were just a few dots on this big map. And that really scared people. They thought, well, how are they going to achieve this? And to be honest, when I saw it, I thought that's probably a bit wild, a bit out there. But actually it's happening. It's happening all over America, with where they've got they're building the smart cities, and the zoning where you can't go between, there's corridors that you can't use because that's only for federal use. And, you know, this is happening here. We've got smart cities here. We've got Bristol, it's a flagship smart city of Europe. We've got Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool. London is huge, but smart city, as we know. Sheffield, Milton Keynes. There's probably about 8 smart cities here, and all the tech is going in now, and it's all run on 5G. And, you know, this is the future. The end game of Agenda 21 is to get everybody off the land into the smart cities, so that the land is only controlled by the government and the federal agencies. And that is because they want the resources from that land. And they don't really want, you know, normal farms. I mean, I have a document on my website, and it's a government document about the future of farming, and it scared me. It really scared me, because really the whole idea is to get rid of small farms and to replace them, rewild the land, pay the farmers to rewild the land, stop the farming, and they're going to bring in these mega farms run on AI and 5G, robotics, and create insect biomass, you know, for replacement protein. And it's all just so, it's all panning out now, you know, and I'm just, I suppose in a way, I was hoping that, you know, to be honest, before the pandemic, I thought, you know, we're winning this because, you know, yeah, exactly, we're winning this because Greta Thunberg had lost a lot of support. You know, people were seeing through it, and I thought climate change just won't cut the mustard. They you know, the very fact that people are questioning the very fact that it turned from global warming to climate change, because it didn't warm, and it's still not warming. In fact, we're in global cooling. And she was just a little bit, people were beginning to see through her, the fact that she was funded by George Soros and the Rothschilds, and even the boat that she was supposed to have sailed around, you know, to America with, it was actually called the Edmund de Rothschild, you know, it was sponsored by him, you know, things like that. And you realize that she's all part of that machine, that propaganda machine. And she was losing it. She was losing support. And that's why she was getting so angry, and all her handlers were getting her to be angry. And I thought, oh, you know, this is, and then this, you know, this virus turns up. And when you look into that, you realize that Event 201 happened, you know, in the Johns Hopkins University in 2019. And that actually, again, they had a scenario of what would happen if we had a, you know, a zoonotic virus that started in some sort of wet market in Brazil or China or something, and then it went right across the world and caused this huge pandemic. How would we handle it? Oh yes, we'd have to get a vaccine, and we'd have to get people to social distance, and we'd have to do this, and it's all panning out. This is all a plan, you know. So and if you think about it, I mean, I was just really shocked, because I had, you know, I had a business running in March, and it's a bar and music venue, and I was given 5 hours by Boris Johnson to close my business down, and it didn't open for 4 months. You know, it's virtually bankrupted so many businesses. And the thing is that 3 days prior to the shutdown, the lockdown, the Public Health England had downgraded this coronavirus, the COVID-19, because it was not a highly infectious, contagious disease. It was not an HICD or whatever it's called. And I thought, oh great, they you know, they've downgraded it. It's not a highly contagious disease. And then literally within 2 days, Imperial College, in their wisdom, had come up with this algorithm, this computer model that had said 500,000 people were going to die. Well, who finances Imperial College? Bill and Melinda Gates. Yeah. You know, they're everywhere. They bought everybody off. And so you got Neil Ferguson, who got it wrong with foot and mouth. He got it wrong with BSE. Still didn't get the sack. He's then suddenly telling us, well, 500,000 people are going to die. And Boris Johnson then completely loses it and tells everybody they've got to shut down. And then after that, he then says, oh, well, maybe it's 250 people, you know, 1,000 people are going to die. Oh, and then maybe 20,000. And then it went down to about 6,000, which is about seasonal flu, you know. And so we've been, and actually, as everyone can see, we're dancing to this ridiculous tune of mask wearing, and, you know, and this is all to progress this agenda, to progress Agenda 21, because the end game is to reduce the population and to have us living in smart cities, surveilled, controlled, data harvested, and literally a drone race, eventually to be merged with the machines, with the AI. Now, this is not a scenario that I really want for my children and grandchildren, and nobody would. But most people don't understand that this is where it's going, and they think that this is a conspiracy theory. It is not a conspiracy theory. All the facts are there. I've got a website called sandyadams.uk, and all the history of Agenda 21 is there. The history of how it came about, what how it's been implemented from global to local. That was the whole idea. It was implemented at the Earth Summit in 1992 as it's almost like a business plan. It's a business plan, a global business plan to control everything on the planet, from global to local. So much so that Agenda 21 policies are in every town council in the UK now. It could be called something else. It'll be called sustainable development. It'll be called smart growth, whatever you want to call it. They've changed the name so many times because so many people realized what it was. But in most town councils, it will be called sustainable development. And it will be in all the planning rules and everything within the locality. And you will find that there's citizens' assemblies being created. Now that is to stop you from having a say. It's to stop you from actually being able to go to your council and say, I don't like this. I'm not sure about this. This isn't right. And there's various, at the moment where I live, because it is reclaimed land under sea level rise, they're trying to create this thing called Adapt 2020, which is adapting to flooding the levels again. And this is happening again, and that I went to a consultation day where a few farmers came out scratching their heads going, oh, that's depressing. They're saying that our farms are going to be underwater. Well, fight it, and they're saying, oh, we're going to have a citizens' assembly to just see how we can adapt to it. Well, a citizens' assembly to adapt to it, so they'll have tables of people, and on each table will be a facilitator and a co-facilitator. These are all Agenda 21 trained people, and this is how it works. They will go around to the table and say, well, how much water can we, how much biodiversity do you want? How many otters do you want in the waters around here? And how many wading birds do you want? Because, the thing is, the sea level is rising, so it's going to flood. So we've got to really embrace all these lovely animals that are going to thrive. But you might have to put your houses on stilts. I mean, they actually had plans for people putting their houses on stilts, and it was all crazy,
What do you advise your farmers in the local area like that are completely unaware of a lot of this going on?
Well, you see, I did have a long chat with quite a few of them, because the thing is that there is no such thing as sea level rise, and a lot of people will disagree with this, but there's a scientist called Niels Axel Morner who we worked very closely with, because there's a town in Wales. The whole town is being evacuated due to sea level rise. And Niels Axel Morner, I think he's Swedish or Norwegian or something. Anyway, he came over and he said there's no sea level rise. And the thing is, this is another hype. This is about, Arctic ice melts making the sea levels rise. There is no sea level rise. I mean, years ago, I remember in the 80s, they said the Maldives would be underwater. Well, they're not. There's loads of things that people have said that, and I'm not a scientist, but I know scientists, and I know scientists who have gone into this. And Niels Axel Morner is actually the world authority on sea level rise, and he said there's no sea level rise in this town in Wales, but the whole town is being evacuated under the sustainable development. They said, but actually, they want to turn it into a conservation area for wild birds, and they want to flood it, and it's getting people off the land again, and the same thing. And I'm setting up, sort of consultations with farmers, trying to educate them into what is really happening around here, particularly with farming, the mega farms. Are they going to really just go along with what the government say and take subsidies to rewild their land and give up their farms? Are they going to submit their farms to the agencies? And it's very difficult because I did talk to one of these environmental agency guys at one of these consultations, and I said, you know, what do you suggest? There's people living here, and there's farms, there's working farms, there's businesses. What are they going to do when it floods? And they said, well, you know, they could relocate to higher level. Well, you know, how? And they did have this ridiculous diagram of what to do with your house, like put your television very high on the wall, all your electrical goods up high, so that if it does flood, you know, you won't get so wet, or you know, building houses on stilts, you know. But this is a long-term thing. This is ridiculous, you know. And they you know, they could flood it overnight like they did with Boroughbridge, you know. It could happen at any time. So, and I did say to the guy from the Environment Agency, how much of this is really sea level rise, and how much of it is you not dredging the reams, chopping down the trees so they don't suck up the water, getting rid of the pumping stations on the levels, because that's what happened down the road in 2014. And he agreed with me. He said, oh yeah, that was terrible. Yeah, it was all degraded, and we didn't actually maintain it. And I said, well, how do you know that that is not the case with adapting to the Somerset levels? You're being told, you're being mentored into this. And they're all completely brainwashed, all these environmental agency people. They're doing their job, they're getting paid, but they're not really looking at it for what it is. They're just happy to get their wages and churn out what the government want them to say. It's crazy.
Yeah, they're not connecting the dots and thinking for
They're
themselves.
They're not connecting the dots at all, at all.
How did you find actually, speaking to your local farmers, how did you find trying to get them on board without them kind of saying, Sandy, that's a bit cracked. That can't be true.
I know, it's difficult. There's a few that have really woken up, and I've been working with Julian Rose, who runs the Hardwick Group, who is a farmer himself. He's an organic farmer, and he's cobbled together a leaflet, which I'm putting a few other things into it, because I'm just editing it at the moment, to try and send it out to all farmers, to go to farmers markets, you know, the cattle markets and all that sort of thing, because there is this whole thing also of getting rid of meat production and really pushing this veganism thing. And, you know, people have a choice. They can be vegetarians, they can be vegans, but the whole thing is we have to have choice. Correct. And if you don't have free will and choice, what is going on, you know? And we're being pushed down this vegan route into eating stuff that you don't know its origins. And I don't want to get into the whole Soylent Green thing, but replacement protein insect biomass, you don't know what's in that. And, you know, they say, oh, it's bugs and crickets. And weirdly, there was a television program the other day where Prue Leith, you know, the cook, she was eating cricket mousse, and it was all a big joke, you know. It was all, let's try this replacement protein, you know. And she was eating it, and I thought, this is really predictive programming, isn't it? It's trying to get people normalized into eating crickets and bugs and stuff. And quite honestly, nobody really wants to eat that, and there's no reason to. I mean, okay, let's have fewer factory farms. I agree with that. I mean, most factory farming is horrible, and particularly abroad. And this is how they're pushing the whole zoonotic disease thing, because abroad, you know, the factory farming is very, very unsavory, and you know, there is a way that pathogens like E. coli can get into the food chain, because the animals aren't being looked after properly. But most farms in this area are small farms, and they're very, you know, they work very well, and some of them are organic. But, you know, again, there is a big move at the moment for the government to bring in GMOs. And right this moment, there's a bill going through Parliament to amend the existing agricultural policy and bring in something called gene editing, which absolutely made my blood boil, because if you amend a bill, it means that it's almost slipped in by the back door. So they know that they can't bring in a GMO bill because people would oppose it. What they're doing is they're amending one to bring in gene editing, which is actually GMO, and it will it can contaminate, you know, crops and effectively get rid of organic. And there's a big move amongst the people like I think it's GM Freeze and a few other organizations to stop that. And we have to stop that because, you know, things are happening in our farming where suddenly overnight it will change if we're not careful. If all these farmers are going to be happy giving up their land and rewilding it, and you know, they bring these mega farms in. And what's interesting about this document on my website is actually it's called the Agricultural Working Group from the food and drink sector. It's on the agricultural section of my website. Do look at it. And it's a very long document, but it actually does talk about insect replacement biomass. But it says that in the future, farmers can't hand their farms down to their family. They have to, farms are mega farms, and you have to go to agricultural college and tech, you know, sort of to learn the technocracy of the AI to run it. So you'll have a whole new breed of farmers who will be technocratic farmers. And the real farmers will not be able to hand their farms to their children. They won't even be able to farm. They're being told you've got to rewild your land to save the planet. Again. And a lot of farmers are buying into that. So I'm going to get this leaflet out. I'm going to put all the stuff about the Agricultural Working Group into it, and also about the, you know, the zoonotic diseases, because, you know, the trouble is that the World Economic Forum are completely bought out by all of this, and they are pushing the agenda, and they want an economic crash, let's face it. And what they're doing, here we are. This is the World Bank. They want to get rid of gross domestic product. You know, is our love affair with gross domestic product coming to an end? As the business landscape reinvents itself, demographics shift, inequality expands, climate change gets worse, and technology advances at breakneck speed, gross domestic product is struggling to stay relevant. In order to keep up with the changes wrought by the fourth industrial revolution, many are arguing that we need to find a new measure to assess the health of our economies and, more importantly, the people living in them. We are examining the past, present and future role of GDP and the new economic models that could replace it. So how do you actually sustain a global population without GDP? And this is what they're saying, we get rid of GDP. Well, this is it. They say the World Bank and the IMF are being asked to throw away their rule books to save the world's imperiled developing economies. But when the pandemic passes, a fiscal reckoning in some form will be essential. After all, the bill for the pandemic will one day fall due, and governments will need to be far more certain than they are today that businesses and individuals will be able to pay their fair share of tax. This will occur in a global governance environment. This is the World Economic Forum saying this. This will occur in a global governance environment that was already changing radically owing to the impact of digital technologies. So what they will do is they will crash the economy and bring in the new world, the new economic order, as they call it, the new Bretton Woods, they're calling it, okay? And this is all about green taxes. This is about keeping us completely held over the barrel with green taxes. This is about getting rid of every gas cooker, every gas boiler in the country, retrofitting our houses. So we have to actually pay up to 30,000 to get our houses up to eco standard. This is all part of Agenda 21 to asset strip the property from people. It's all about global communism. This is what it's about, and I hate to be absolutely frank. It's called communitarianism. It's a form of communism, but it's by consent, and that's what communitarianism is. It's by consent, and not a shot has been fired, but we will be asset stripped. And it's about getting rid of the economy as it is, getting rid of GDP, getting rid of businesses. The corporations will take over. Getting rid of businesses. This is all Agenda 21. It's about being able to have a very compliant global citizen, and you will be controlled by your blockchain wallet, because the other thing that they'll be doing is data harvesting. Now, the new economy will be green taxes and impact investing. Now, if anybody wants to look into impact investing, there's a whole, it opens up a whole nother can of worms, because it is all about being able to, the investors are investing in the perfect global citizens, and their data will create the perfect global citizen. Now, you don't come up to scratch, you don't become a perfect global citizen, they don't get their money. So what will they do? They'll sanction you. It's like the Chinese social credit system.
I was just going to say it, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, the whole thing is opening up before our very eyes, and all this technology is there in place. You know, we've got the cashless society coming in on the back of this pandemic. You know, we've got people social distancing, and that is helping with the surveillance, you know, the digital surveillance, because as we know, you know, 2 meters, you know, and the facial recognition, all of that is playing out, and we've got to really be aware that we are being played like a Stradivarius. We're not, you know, we're being very compliant, and it is a form of coercion and torture. I mean, the CIA know how to psychologically prepare people to be compliant, and that's what's happening to us right now. You know, the very fact of wearing masks when we know that the virus, you know, deaths are now, if indeed, I mean, we know that they were manipulated, but the fact is that, you know, it's like shutting the stable door once the horse has bolted. We're all being told now to wear masks in shopping in supermarkets and stuff, and we haven't for the last 4 months, when it was actually, you know, the graphs were higher, or supposedly. So this is all a way of, it's all a form of, if you like, humiliation, queuing up in the rain to go into shops with masks on. It's a form of coercion, of beating us up. And, you know, the whole impact investing thing, I've been looking at a very wonderful woman in America called Alison McDowell, who's been looking at how in America, they're putting in the technology into schools, Google Classroom, which means that they can then distance learn and close the schools, not have teachers, but those children will be data harvested from cradle to grave, to create, again, the perfect global citizen. And there'll be investors investing in that global citizen. So it's like harvesting our souls, you know. So I'm just a bit, you know, if we can just wake up more people and better understand how Agenda 21 is really affecting us on a daily basis. Not many people know what it is. You know, I've done my website so that you can actually just go on it, and a 5-year-old could understand the whole story of Agenda 21 and how it's come about, and how we've actually ended up being in this position with this pandemic. Because at the moment, the BBC said yesterday, there will be no end to this, that it won't be back to normal by Christmas. In fact, it may not be back to normal ever. Now, that was really something to digest yesterday, that this is it. This is what is normal. And it will, you know, the fact that they've been predictive programming us into knowing that there's going to be more waves. And the fact is that there's also this whole zoonotic thing, which I did rack my brains the other day and thinking, how will they get us into the smart cities? And of course, I didn't need to go further than the United Nations website, where they were talking about zoonotic diseases and how zoonotic disease spreads from animals to humans and backwards. And pathogens can be in plants and animals. And countryside is a very dangerous place, you know, for human beings. And how really they
Just like they
then
showed in Event 201.
yeah, exactly. And it really relates straight back to 201 with, oh yes, it was found in a bat, you know, a wet market in Wuhan. Well, actually the CDC pulled that one out. They've never proved it. They have never proved that COVID-19 came from a bat market or a wet market in Wuhan or from a bat. They've never ever proved it. This is all conjecture. And in fact, none of it has ever been proved. There's not even any way of proving that there is a COVID-19 virus. There's nothing to prove any of this. It's just been the most extraordinary PR scam that has ever been put on the whole of humanity. It's a big lie. The whole thing has been, it's a monstrous exercise in compliance.
I totally agree. And how far do you think the 2030 is a big year that keeps coming up the whole time? But as we speak, how far do you actually think we are into it? Because I mean, as we know, most of the population is asleep and they don't actually realize this is actually going on and has been going on for some time.
I think the thing is that we are pretty, I mean, I ought to explain to people as well, Agenda 21 turned into Agenda 2030 in 2015. That sounds a bit. And what happened was Agenda 21 in its form, it was the agenda for the 21st century. That was the one that was launched in the Earth Summit in 1992. And in 2015, it became Agenda 2030. It then became the agenda for 2030. We've got, 15 years basically to turn the world around in this social engineering project. And they launched the 17 goals of Agenda 21, which were 8 goals when it was Agenda 21. So, and it was all launched in Rome with the blessing of the Pope, literally making the Pope the United Nations servant on earth. Yeah, with President Obama. And what they did was they launched these 17 goals to be achieved by 2030. And the way they're achieving them is exactly what they're doing now, which is they say things like, well, we're going to end world poverty. Well, that means crushing the economy and making everybody poor, So basically there's poverty for all. We're going to stop hunger. Well, they'll bring in GMO, Monsanto. That'll stop,
I
hunger.
See, I even have the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in front of me. I mean, even just looking at, I won't go through them all, but even just looking at the first 4, I mean, they sound brilliant on the opposite. I mean, who would be against
it? Oh,
this?
yeah, it sounds wonderful.
I mean, you've number 1, you've no poverty, sounds great. Number 2, zero hunger. Number 3 is good health and well-being. And number 4 is quality education. I mean, sounds brilliant. Who would ever want to be against that?
The health is all about vaccines, as we know, and the education is all about data harvesting from cradle to grave, distance learning. The whole thing is a nightmare, and the trouble is that it's always presented as this amazing utopian dream, in the same way as the Green New Deal is, but it's not a utopian dream.
It's what's actually behind the veil.
Yeah, it's something to. It's just a sugar-coated pill, which is really a poison pill, and. A lot of people say, oh, you just see the negativity and everything. What if it's really good? Well, if you look at the history of it and how it's planning out, that these people who are creating this don't have our best interests at heart.
It's all documented in the blueprint.
Yeah, that's it. They don't care about us. They really don't. And what I'm noticing is that it's a very, it's not a human agenda. It's a very, very transhuman agenda, which is basically what the end game is. Not only do they want us living in smart cities, but they want to merge us with machines and create the transhuman, the perfect human.
Elon Musk is working on that at the moment.
Yes, I mean, this is it. We've got all these megalomaniacs like Bill Gates and Elon Musk, and these people have not. And you look at Zuckerberg. These people don't seem to be human themselves. They don't seem to there's something wrong. There's no humanity in any of this. And this is what I think I, I end up praying as well, at night, because I don't know how we're going to see our way out of this. If people are going to comply and carry on and literally kind of walk into their own concentration camps, what are we to do? And this is what you and I are here for today, is to really push this and get people to understand that there will be no humanity. There will be no humanity if we don't actually fight this and fight it with all our hearts, I don't know, have you looked at Deagle.com?
No, I haven't.
Do you know Deagle? This is something that's, people say, oh, well, it could be a hoax or something, but there's a website called Deagle.com, Deagel, I think it's EL, Deagel.com, and it seems to be a military website, and it tells you how many tanks and how many what kind of munitions all the countries have got. But there's a part of it that it's got a population button that you can click on. And someone pointed this out to me a long, long time ago when I was talking about Agenda 21 and depopulation. And if you click you go on the population bit, what they've done, this military website, they've forecast the populations of every country in the world. And what's interesting about the United States and England is that, the United States falls dramatically as well. It gives you a forecast up to 2025. Now, at the moment, the population in England is about 65 million, isn't it?
It is, yeah, about 65.
About
plus,
65
yeah.
million.
Yeah.
Well, in 2025, you look at the forecast of 2025, 14 million.
14.
So 14.
Wow.
So how do they come to that figure? And do you know, they can't answer that. They won't answer that. People have tried to get the answers. And it's the same in the States. It drops dramatically. And there's very few countries. There's a few countries where it doesn't change. There's a few countries where actually the population goes up. Places like Vietnam, Thailand, they seem to be okay, all those. But for some reason, the UK drops from 65 million to 14. Why?
That's a lot in a 5-year period.
Yeah. I mean, and what is there? What's afoot, really? So I don't know. I don't want to be a fearmonger. I just look at what's there, and just, people have to be aware, because if you're forewarned, you're forearmed, and that's the only thing I can say, is that we need to really form an army, as they say.
Yeah, we need to unite, and that's the one thing that the 1% or the New World Order doesn't want.
It doesn't want that, and that's why we've had all this stuff with Black Lives Matter and the division. We've had Brexit, we've had climate change, we've had, whether you're a murdering, non-mask wearer or a mask wearer. Do you know what I mean? It's people are going to start fighting, and I'm pretty sure this whole mask mandatory thing in the next few days is there to cause division, because there's some people that are just not going to adhere to it.
It's coming in actually in England tomorrow in the shops.
Yeah, tomorrow. Yeah. And the thing is that it will cause almighty division between people, because there's a lot of people that are very fearful. They do think that if they don't wear a mask, they're going to die. I noticed even today, I stopped at a farm shop, and this woman said, stay 2 meters away, and she had a mask on, and she said, you should be wearing a mask. And I said, well, I will tomorrow, because they're making it mandatory. But, we're in the middle of the countryside, and I'm not even in your shop yet. Exactly. I'm outside. So it was just, I don't know, it's a very, very difficult thing, because, the trouble is the government have made a very good job of making people terrified. And they, it's another step up. And I don't know if you saw the Bill and Melinda Gates video of them talking about the next wave. Did you see that?
Yes.
Where they smirk?
Yeah.
Now that sent chills down my spine, because to me, that is, after that, I started looking into various articles about diseases, and of course, they've got bunny Ebola at the moment in parts of America, and they've got apparently the bubonic plague has popped up in China, in a province of China, and when he said, the next thing that will get the attention, and he smirked, and I thought, they both did, and I thought, this is a game to them,
Exactly.
it's some kind of horrible game where they will conjure up something. And whether they really conjure it up, whether they really have something deadly, or whether they'll do the same and ramp something that isn't deadly up to be deadly, who knows? But, the thought is that they won't conjure something up to be deadly because they have to keep control of it, and they won't if it's deadly.
Exactly. Well, Bill Gates has been talking about, I think it was his TED Talk back in 2016, and there's many, many occasions just after his father, Bill Gates Senior, eugenicist and stuff. He's been talking about depopulation for a long, long time, and people wouldn't even believe me when I was talking about him. I had to say, look, they're getting so bold now at everything that they're openly talking about and discussing about this, and it's nothing new.
Well, they are. I mean, they are eugenicists. I mean, William Gates worked for Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger was Planned Parenthood. Now, she was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. She set up eugenics clinics all over the Deep South in America to try and stop Black people from having children. I mean, I've got photographs of her at Ku Klux Klan. Is it Ku Klux? I can never say it. Ku Klux Klan meetings, and she was a total racist, horrible, sort of woman.
Not a nice individual.
And Bill Gates' father was all involved in all of that, and it's in the family.
As I said, the apple don't fall too far from the tree.
Yeah. So, when you've got that whole eugenics movement going on, and it's interesting because that also goes right back to the Club of Rome, people that are members of the Club of Rome, like Cecil Rhodes, all of those people who are involved in the British eugenics movement, and all of that is sort of Darwinian stuff. All of that is somehow part of it, and there's a thread that runs right through to present day, where you've got all this playing out now. And it's an agenda that's been going on for centuries, and we're living with it now because we are literally at that stage where, it's Orwell and Huxley, George Orwell and Aldous Huxley, Orwell was a student of Huxley, wasn't he? And Aldous Huxley's brother, Julian Huxley, was in the Club of Rome, and he was also he was in the United Nations. He was part of the education part, UNESCO, and he was really advocating this whole agenda to bring humanity under control. They didn't call it Agenda 21 then, but they were still pushing it. The British eugenics movement, all of that lot. It was about always controlling the populations of the world.
Yeah, I say it's nothing new. It's been going on for a very, very long time.
Long time.
The only thing I can say is that a lot of people I've spoken in the last couple of months with the lockdown, people now that wouldn't have been into this at all, or were just under normal day job, went home and stuff like that, now they're starting to wake up and question. They're not really sure what's going on, but they're actually starting to get curious and question things, and that's exactly what we're here for as well today, is to make people that are totally unaware, people that are going around blue pilled every day, for want of a better word, and now they need to take that red pill. And because, as you know yourself, once you've taken the red pill, pretty much, not in a literal sense, but there's no looking back.
You can't go back.
Looking forward all the time. That's it. And no, it's great.
You can't unknow what you know. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's why the mainstream media, they're like little Rottweilers for the government, and the government being controlled by the 1% overhead. And I mean, the list goes on to trace it back. I mean, and through fear, that's how the population have pretty much been controlled. If everybody in the morning just said, you know what, we're not doing this, we're not wearing masks, we're not social distance, what can you do? All of a sudden, those people in the dark suits, well, their power is stripped from them straight away. There's nothing they can do. They know that, and that's why they want us to unite. And that's why the common denominator in, be it the Black Lives Matter movement, the coronavirus, the few other ones you mentioned a while ago, the common denominator is divide and conquer, and not have people unite. When people unite, we can be dangerous in the way of information we can gather from each other. And that's what they're afraid of.
Social distancing is keeping us all from meeting up and talking about this, you see. And that's another psychological operation. is keeping us all so distant, so that we can't meet and we can't talk about it. And you know, it's been, yeah, it's been a hard old slog with some people, because also, you know, it creates a lot of mental illness with people, you know, not being able to socially gather. You know, we're very, you know, we're human beings, we like to have contact with each other.
Of
You
course.
know, we're not really meant to be distanced. Yeah. And I think you're right that, you know, the more that we can, there are people questioning it now, and honestly, it's almost like that tipping point, you know, like the 100 monkey syndrome. It's that tipping point that we need to get to, where people that are thinking there's something wrong, but I can't put my finger on it, you know, and once they know the information and they can join the dots, and that's what I hoped my website would do, would be to join the dots for people between the different things. And you know, knowing that Agenda 21 was put there really to create the smart cities, divide us and take us into the, divide us from nature. You know, human beings are meant to be living in symbiosis with nature. Nature nurtures us. It keeps us sane. It keeps us healthy. We should not be living in concrete jungles under surveillance. This
No.
is a monstrous idea
And
made
of
by
course,
monsters.
the rollout of 5G at the moment as well, while all this
Yeah,
pandemic and stuff is going on, and anybody mentions on any social media site about 5G, censored and banned straight away. I mean, why is that?
yeah,
I mean, there's
yeah.
loads of great people out there have proven dangers of 5G,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah,
they're shut down straight away.
yeah. Absolutely. No, it is a monstrous agenda, and it just takes a bit of, you know, a bit of pushing all this information out and getting people to just say no, because all of this is done with consent.
Yes, through people's compliance. Just don't comply anymore. Get on with your normal life, and things can
Yeah.
get okay again.
And that's it. It's just about enough people being brave enough to say absolutely no, no, not
Yeah.
doing it. You know, it's like, you know, this whole contact tracing thing. You know, a lot of businesses, you walk in and they'll there's one cafe in town where you can't go in without this app, the contact tracing app, and they take your temperature when they go in. You know,
Right.
and I just said, no, I'm not having a coffee in your place. I'll go down the road where they don't do that. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
and you know, the whole thing about the details, the contact details, is that it's against the Data Protection Act to do so. It's actually against the law to take people's details,
But they don't
because,
care.
you know, it's, yeah. So you know, I won't do it in my place. I've said no, I'm not taking people's details. I put a few arrows on the floor and everybody ignores them.
Rightly so. It's like the dehumanizing of society.
Exactly. You know,
Yeah.
it's treating us like cattle, isn't it? You know, you've got to go that way, and then you've got to, you know, one way system and this, that, and the other. And it's like, it is dehumanizing us. You're right. It's taking away our will, breaking our will to their will.
Of
And
course.
this is what it is. It's an exercise in compliance that we can't really, we should not be going along with. We've got to stand
No.
up.
I think if George Orwell was around today, I think he'd be wincing in his grave to see actually how far this stuff actually went.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. He would. Although, you know, sometimes I wonder whether they were all part of it. They were just sort of, I don't know. But yeah. Well, the Huxleys were, so I don't know. I don't know about Orwell.
Brave
I
New
don't know.
World, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's certainly accelerated, you know, from, you know, from the 1990s. It's gone at breakneck speed to this horrible technocratic, you know, dystopian nightmare, really. And it's all fueled by megalomaniacs, really, people like Elon Musk, you know.
Yeah, with his
I
Neuralink
thought,
and
did you see Starlink go across? There was he was launching all these satellites going across the sky. He's making a grid of satellite systems going right around the Earth, and he was launching them, and they went across the West Country. And I thought it was UFOs or something. I thought, what the hell is that? All this whole string of lights going across the sky, hundreds of them. And it was only when I Googled it and I phoned up a friend and they said, oh, that's Elon Musk Starlink going over.
When was
And
this?
he's creating this grid. You can see it on Google Earth, this grid of satellites. It goes right around. And it goes against all the space junk, laws. All this stuff in the sky is totally against the space junk laws. It shouldn't be there, really. And he's got all that stuff going up there, and that is again to control the surveillance and the 5G and everything else. And yet everyone's going, oh, look at that, isn't that amazing?
I know.
It's not.
The ignorance and innocence of it all.
Yeah. So I don't know. We've just got to what I'm worried about now is this whole thing of new waves of it coming, and us never ever being free from this unless we really see it for what it is, because they'll just keep it going, perpetuating it. And they've said now that town councils have now have more powers to shut down their town, and even individual businesses if they think they're not complying properly.
I've seen that recently just come in from the government.
Yeah. And you've got things like, shutting whole areas down, like Leicestershire. It's interesting that it was Leicestershire, wasn't it? They shut that, and it's right in the centre of England. So, that if they can shut the centre of England down, they could radiate, and it could actually then be, oh, we'll shut the north down, we'll shut the northeast down, and then we'll shut the southeast down and the southwest down, and take it in turns, so that everybody's economies suffer. Because at the end of the day, the World Economic Forum have already said they want it all to crash. They don't want GDP, they don't want business, they want a green economy, and that will be a non-price-based economy. It'll be a cashless society, and all these carbon taxes that they want to foist on.
I spoke to friends of mine for years about the dangers of a cashless society coming in, and the more and more I talked about, the more they think you're cracked, because the media constantly see putting, use this credit card, use plastic, is much better than cash. You don't want to be fumbling around with cash in your pocket because you might lose it and you can't get it back, and it's non-traceable, and so on and so on. So the more they go on about these, they say, oh, but it's convenient, Chris. I mean, why would you not want to use it? And I says, trust me, I said it years ago, you will pay for your convenience in time. I said, if cash circulates out of society and they do the digital financial reset, which they're trying to be after here at the moment as well, part of this so-called pandemic, I said, we're really in deep waters, because they've total control. No matter what money you earn per year, you're on the database as a digital currency. And if they decide overnight, hey, Chris or Sandy, do you know what? There's been a crash in the system. There's been an error in the network. You haven't been a good buy today. Just going back to the social credit system like China. And all of a sudden, the money you so hardly earned, you don't have it physical anymore. You can't barter like you used in the old days. So you've no way to feed your own kids, your own family. It's crazy. And unfortunately, cash is getting less and less. And I'm trying to advise people all the time. I mean, I will just use cash no matter where I go. And that's it. Simple as that. And people say to me, but you're kind of, what does it matter, Chris? Nobody knows you. What are you after? Why do you think they're tracing you or what? I said, it doesn't matter. I says, yes, I'm a nobody. I says, but at the end of the day, either I'm buying a bar of chocolate in the shop or putting petrol in the car, it doesn't matter. The fact is, it says, you're getting into good habits, it says, because of what's ahead, it says. So you're constantly using your car, stick to your cash, and it'll be a lot better in time to come. And it'll come a day when it's too late, and I hope that day never comes. And then you look back and you say, Jesus, he was actually right.
Yeah, because you see, the minute there is no cash, they can control the money supply. Yes. And there's a lot to be said for the black economy and being able to be, the people to be in charge of the economy in some ways, because at the end of the day, that they can just stop your rights and privileges. And this is what will happen when they bring in this whole blockchain thing, which is based on data. Our data is the new gold, it's the new currency, along with carbon credits and carbon taxing.
It's been massive on the black market actually for a long time as well. Data selling constantly,
And if you don't comply, then you'll be cut off from those privileges. You won't be able to fly abroad, or you might not be able to to have access to food or money, or your blockchain money, because this is what happens in China. They've got these people that, and it's almost like they become untouchables. They have untouchables in India that don't have any rights or freedoms or anything, and so that's what it creates. It creates this system where, unless you're the perfect global citizen, this compliant person who really wants to engage with all the technology and the transhumanism and everything else, if you do that, then you're fine. But if you don't, you'll be penalized, and that's the problem.
Exactly. And I'd recommend people that, if they haven't heard of the China social credit score system, to actually check it out. It is a real thing.
Yeah.
And what's happening there is just sweeping across the West under our nose.
Yeah. Under a pandemic. It's very clever how it's been done. It's ticked all the boxes.
Yes, it's very well orchestrated. No convenience.
Yeah, it's genius.
Or no coincidence, I should say.
Yeah, it's genius the way that it's been brought about, and the very fact, this whole threat. I was looking the other day at what was it? It was the Amnesty International's definition of torture, and it literally, what's happening to the humanity right now ticks all the boxes of the definition of torture, because there's some of it which is coercion, there's some of it that's fear-based coercion, like if you don't do this, this will happen, and the very fact, and humiliation, which we've got. And one of them was the fear that nothing will go back to normal, like you're being held captive and you'll never be able to go home. That is how I feel at the moment, that my whole idea of home, this country, has gone. We'll never go back home. We'll never go back to normal. And that is a big threat in torture, is that things, you'll never go back to normal if you don't comply with, or comply to their will, and it's to break our will and to make us comply. And the fact that our world has changed so dramatically, and the threat of it going, they've eased it up a little bit, almost to give us this false sense of security of what it's a new normal. It's not normal, but it's a little bit more normal than it was a few months ago. But unless you're good and you wear those masks, it'll go back to being the way it was before. And it's just manipulation the whole time,
That's all it is. It's kind of giving us these small little increments of release, and then all of a sudden, whoa, I need to reel you back in again. All of a sudden, it's crazy.
And I just it's a very, very, I know it's causing a lot of depression with people, and I know that my family have two of my family have suffered depression over it, but partly it's because they don't understand what's going on, and they don't, even if I try and tell them, they think it's conspiracy. So I don't talk about it anymore. I thought, well, soon, one day you'll understand, but I can't actually go there with my family, and I just talk to other people.
Which is sad, unfortunately.
Yeah. One of my family gets it, but the rest don't. But that's the way it is, And I don't know. Do you find that people that do they think you're crazy? Because a lot of people do.
Yeah, and not as much on these recent couple of months. I've been saying lots of stuff for years, and all of it was like, you could see they were taking it in, but started looking over my head at the same time, kind of going, all right, here he's off on some mad one again. And then like a year or so later, they'd ring me up and say, oh, do you remember that thing you said a year ago? Yeah, well, actually, it happened. And I've no magic ball or anything like that. I said, it's just called research. I constantly, whatever's on the forefront, I'll always peel a couple of layers back and look what's behind it. Follow the money trail, see who's funding it, the usual suspects, hand in hand, connect the dots again, and boom, there we are again. But whatever's going on today is nothing new. It's been linked, as you say, you go back to Rockefellers, Rothschilds. There's a whole host of them there that's constantly. So trying to explain to people this situation and kind of go, well, it's not just today. You have to go into a massive history into all this originally, where things actually accumulated from in the first place. But I do believe that But from my own personal experience, there has been people ringing me more so in the last couple of months. At the very beginning, like, they were very cautious of it, and I
Yeah.
smelt a rat straight away. And I said, look, it's this, and this. And they were like, oh, I don't know, but, we better do this and we better do that because the government says so. And within
Mm.
maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks, I was talking to begin the phone, and they start to ease up on things. And then they say, oh, this
Yeah.
can't be real. And this can't be real, that can't be real. So I went on, and all of a sudden they were tuning into a lot more stations and a lot more alternative sources that they never would have before, because
Yeah.
their busy lives stopped all of a sudden, and they had more time in their hands. They were off work for maybe 2, 3, 4 months. So they sat down every day and kind of just delved a small bit into this bit by bit. I said, I don't fully understand it, but thank God they're not jumping head over heels to basically, we'll get this done, we'll get that vaccine. Yeah, no problem with that. They're starting to stand back a bit and say, maybe it's not all it's actually made out to me. Maybe there is some sort of agenda or plan behind this, and it's actually maybe a conspiracy and not a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. No, exactly. And I found that because I've been doing talks, what happened was I started doing talks all over England about Agenda 21. That's the only way I could, sort of at that time, when I started about 10 years ago, I didn't think of doing podcasts or anything like that. So I started doing talks, and I was talking at festivals in the Southwest about it. And I was being asked to talk in these funny tents, that you have, speaker tents. And I bumped into Mark Windows, who runs a website called Windows on the World, and Piers Corbyn. They were doing it too. And I sort of teamed up with them, and we started doing road shows all over England, right up until lockdown. Actually, we went on the road for about 2 years, just every weekend, going to different places all over, all over the
nice,
country.
yeah.
It was quite fun, but because Piers used to do the whole climate change thing and debunking it with the Climate Gate scandal and everything like that. And it just dovetailed together very well. And literally the last one we did was just before lockdown, and so we haven't been out since. But what's good is that we've been developing, sort of radio shows and stuff. But yeah, it's been good to try and get the word out. And because I was doing them in my locality, there was a lot of people, particularly the Extinction Rebellion lot, who were really angry every time I did a talk at the town hall here or in my place, because I've got a music venue. And it's really interesting now, because a lot of people are coming up to me and saying, that talk you did, I thought you were mad, but you're not, are you? I thought, no, I'm not.
Yeah, they eventually see the light. Yeah, stay
So
well away from
I'm
that
getting a
Extinction
lot of
Rebellion crowd
people
anyway.
saying, yeah, a lot of people that were saying, a lot of my staff actually thought I was absolutely batshit crazy. And then suddenly they're saying, oh my God, I get it.
The dots started to align, the penny started to fall. Yeah, I know the feeling. And how did you find, going back a couple of years ago, did you get a lot of abuse? Did people just say that one is cracked? Did some people kind of agree? How was the receptance basically from a lot of people overall? Pretty mixed, or?
It was mixed, actually. There were a lot of people that turned up to the talks who were curious and who came up afterwards and said, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm going to go and do some research, and I'd give them pointers of where to go for the research. And then there were some people that would literally storm out and say, that's a load of rubbish. I thought you were going to talk about climate change, And yeah, it's a very mixed bag, and you didn't know whether you would get like 100 people in or 10, and some places only maybe there'd be 10 or 20 people, but it didn't matter, because actually in some of those venues there are people that I've kept in contact with, and they formed amazing groups in their area. So it did sort of go out and become a little bit viral, which was good, because wherever you went, there would be maybe 2 or 3 people that would say, we're gonna put this out in our local area. We're gonna research this and push it out. And we formed Facebook groups, and there's a lovely band of them down in Sussex, who are real warriors. They're really pushing the information out, and so it's been an interesting time, It's been very interesting. And I kind of slightly miss going out on the, doing the shows, but we're doing it online now. And I'm sort of doing a few in America as well. So that's kind of interesting, because in America they're seeing Agenda 21 in action far more because it started earlier there. And there's more people in America that seem to know what it is. If you talk to most Joes on the street here, they've never heard of it. And you say sustainable development, and they kind of vaguely, that kind of rings a bell. But yeah, no one really realizes how deep this has been infiltrated, and it's a form of open infiltration that's happened over a number of years. And it's kind of a psychological Tavistock Institute, operation, really.
And what's the road ahead for Sandy? What does the next 12 months hold for you? What's your plans and thoughts?
My plans, well, I think the biggest thing for me is to set up my own platform to broadcast, which is, you're brave enough to do it, and I've got to do that too. Because what I do is I get invited onto other people's shows and I do it, and I'm getting lots of people sharing my stuff that I do on other people's networks. But I've really got to get over my fear of technocratic stuff, technology,
Resistance,
and get going. And it's difficult because, I'm an older person, and I just, I've been doing this for such a long time, and I really should get on and do the broadcasts and have my own platform. I've got my own I've got a Facebook page which is Uncloaking Agenda 21. I've got my own Facebook page which I only do Agenda 21 on it.
I'm surprised Zuckerberg has left it up for you.
Yeah, and I've got my website which is growing, and yeah, that's sandyadams.uk. And yeah, I really would like to do more and just try and get the word out all the time.
That's key. It says it's not an individual thing, as I realize myself. It's unity and growing as a team, and like us connecting, and others. And I say you've got people in Sussex and all people around the country, in England alone, just uniting and banding together. It's the only way you're going to defeat these global tyrannists.
And this is why I'm very thankful for you, because all of us who have got this, who understand what is going on, we've really joined together and push it out and really get people on board. And I'm very grateful to be able to talk to you tonight about it, and you will put it out. None of this is anybody's. I'm not precious about it. And if people can just put out my work, I'm just very happy for people to just put it out and get the word out, because it's so important, because not many people understand what really is going on.
And where can people find you?
People can find me on, I'm just Sandi Adams, Facebook, or Uncloaking Agenda 21. That's another Facebook page I set up in the early days for people who just wanted to talk about Agenda 21. And I've got my website, which is sandyadams.uk. And that's it, really. Yeah, you can friend me on Facebook and I'll talk to you if you want to know anything else. Yeah.
Brilliant stuff, Sandi. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I'll put all the links below in the description, and hope to be in touch soon.
Bless you. Thanks very much, Chris. It's been brilliant. Thank you.
No problem at all. My pleasure. Take care.